Okay, edge services. Edge services is a way of being able to do things like anti-spam, antivirus, and content filtering. Okay. Now, normally you'd get messages coming via the internet straight through to your servers. So if that's the case, you can implement this Forefront Security for Exchange Server, which gives you these types of benefits. Or if you like, you can have, instead of coming direct to you, you can have the mail reconfigured such that it goes via the Microsoft Exchange hosted services, which does more or less the same thing as what we've described up here, but at the internet layer before it touches your corporate network, and only valid content is then sent through. Okay, and if you want to, this can be your second layer of defense. All right, so you can use Microsoft Exchange hosted services as your first layer, then Forefront Security as your second layer of defense, and then it gets delivered through to your Exchange servers. Alright, just a diagram showing a little bit more detail of what happens, but again, we've got mail coming in from the internet, then we go through a number of spam prevention facilities. If it's obviously spam, we can just mark it as so and just get rid of the message. Otherwise, if it passes our spam tests, then we can go through the actual virus tests. Now the nice thing about this is, notice that we've actually got a number of different antivirus engines. Alright, so what can happen here is that you might, have whatever, Norman, Kaspersky and something else. So the point is that you can have multiple engines that it's got to get through, and if it gets through that one, it's then got to get through that one, and then it's got to get through that one before it's allowed actually through. Okay, so if not, it's dumped as content that's just deleted, because obviously it's got virus content. Otherwise, if it gets through that, it then goes through a set of policy enforcement rules. If it gets through that, it now goes through a number of spam prevention facilities, and in the case that it does block some spam content, remember that sometimes it may get it wrong. Therefore, it will put it into a quarantine area of which you will have access to remotely. Okay, just in case you want to release something saying, you know what, that's not spam, that's actually fine, right? Okay, so then after it goes through the spam feature protection features, then if your Exchange server is available, it will basically send it straight through to you. If it's not available, it will take it through to a spool and spool it there as long as it's required, until it detects that your Exchange server comes back to life. Once it comes back to life, then it flushes the content through to you. Alright, this is a bit of a marketing blurb just in terms of Exchange hosted services and what they do. I won't go through to it in detail, alright, but Exchange hosted filtering is what we've just talked about. Hosted archive is just a way of being able to do journaling and archiving like we've been talking about, but again at the internet level. Hosted continuity is just a high availability solution, and hosted encryption, obviously it provides encryption services for your email. Alright, so we've talked about hosted Exchange services out here, which are out on the internet, alright, but if you want, you can deploy Forefront security technology in 2 locations on your own network. Okay, the first one is, this one here is your outer, or if you like, the proper term for it, if you like, is called the front end firewall, and this is your back end firewall. Okay, now the zone in between is called the demilitarized zone. They might look at that and say, well, you know what, we don't have 2 firewalls, right? So how is that relevant to me? Well, let's just quickly take a look at it at a common scenario as well. You might have a firewall. This here is your internal segment. This here is your external segment. This is your router going off through to the internet. And then here you've got your demilitarized zone with some sort of servers in there. This might be perhaps a web server or an ISA box or something like that. That's a semi-trusted system, if you like, or a bastion host. Okay, and this is called a 3-legged configuration, right? Obviously because we've got 3 interfaces on our firewall. Okay, so if you've only got the one firewall, the likelihood is you've probably got this particular scenario. But even still, when information comes in from the internet through to this DMZ system, it's got to cross your firewall. Okay, so that's the first time it crosses your firewall. So in other words, the firewall will have rules saying from external to DMZ, then do this, 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 and don't allow that, that, that. Okay, so that's the first filter it's got to get through. And then though, if this system needs to communicate with an internal Exchange server, then it's got to go back through the firewall in order to talk to it. So the firewall here would have a rule saying from DMZ through to internal, then allow this, don't allow that. Okay, so to a degree, you're still going through your firewall twice. Okay, so even though you may not have two firewalls, you still do have the ability of controlling both of those flows in and out. So coming back through to here, this again is our demilitarized zone. And there's my writing. And so again, we can install forefront security here in our demilitarized zone. And normally what would happen is that we would put it on the box that had Exchange Edge services, or the Edge role, if you like, installed on it. You don't necessarily have to do that, but that is just a recommendation. And similarly, you can install forefront security on your internal network as well. Okay, and like we talked about, it does anti-spam, antivirus, but multiple engines for antivirus, which is nice, and content filtering as well.